Ever imagine using cigarettes to, like, buy your lunch?
Well, that's exactly what happens in prison economies.
Wild, right? Today, we're diving into these fascinating systems where everyday items become serious currency.
It's incredible how these intricate economies spring up, even with so many restrictions.
Yeah, prison is like its own little society.
Exactly, with unique hierarchies and rules, but still, these complex systems emerge, driven by those basic human needs and the desire for a little, normalcy.
Okay, limited resources, I get that. But cigarettes, why were they the main currency for so long?
Well, picture this, 19th and early 20th century prisons. It's pretty grim, right?
Not exactly a vacation spot.
No, not at all. But tobacco was finding its way in, and for these inmates, a smoke. That was a little escape from the monotony, the stress.
Makes sense.
And cigarettes themselves, they're portable, easy to split up for smaller transactions, and super easy to exchange. Perfect for a closed system like that.
So even in prison, people want that little bit of comfort.
Exactly. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. Even during World War II, POW camps, they faced similar situations.
Seriously.
Yeah, cigarettes became the preferred currency there too for trading goods, services. Shows how valuable they become in restricted environments.
It's like cigarettes became a universal language.
Precisely. From the US and Europe all the way to Asia, cigarettes dominated these economies for decades.
Wow. So these systems, they were super adaptable.
Absolutely. Shows how much human behavior, even in those situations, wants to establish order, create value.
Fascinating. So, okay, these systems are thriving, cigarettes are king, but what happened when prisons started cracking down on tobacco? Did everything just collapse?
Not at all. Things actually got even more interesting.
How so?
These economies, they were resilient, adapted, and found brand new forms of currency.
Let me guess. Ramen noodles.
You got it. Ramen became the unexpected successor.
That's crazy.
I know, right? They were cheap, easy to carry around, surprisingly durable.
And I'm guessing everybody wanted them.
Exactly. Hit all the right notes to become the new way to trade.
So wait, a pack of ramen noodles suddenly has the same power cigarettes used to.
Yeah. Sounds strange, but it shows how much perception drives value and how quickly these informal markets change. What we see is those core principles of economics. Supply, demand, scarcity, they all apply even in these weird settings.
This is honestly blowing my mind. Like, it's Econ 101, but with cigarettes and ramen noodles.
That's a great way to put it. And it goes even deeper when we look at the specific mechanisms at play. Like, have you ever heard of Gresham's law?
Can't say I have.
Well, it basically says bad money drives out good.
Okay.
So in prisons, this happened when cigarettes, which were like the good currency, got replaced by ramen, the, let's say, bad or less desirable one. Even though ramen became the new normal, it didn't have the same, inherent value as cigarettes.
So even within these informal systems, you see these complex economic principles.
Exactly. And it's not just about the objects themselves, but the social structures, the trust, the power dynamics. It's a glimpse into human behavior under pressure and how we as humans try to make order even in the toughest places.
This is getting really interesting.
Yeah.
We've got cigarettes, ramen, and now some economic law I've never even heard of. I can't wait to get deeper into these mechanics in the next part of our deep dive. We left off talking about Gresham's law and how it actually plays out in these prison economies.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right?
It is. It shows how even in these contained systems, you see the same economic stuff happening as in the real world.
Exactly. It really underlines that no matter where you are, the basics of economics, they stay the same. And a great example of that is scarcity.
Scarcity, right.
Just like outside, when something gets scarce in prison, its value, it goes way up.
So think about those times when there's a hurricane. Suddenly, a bottle of water costs like $10.
Perfect example. And in prison, that applies to, well, pretty much everything. Cigarettes, the ramen we talked about, even those mackerel packets, limited supply, constant demand, that creates a pressure cooker for prices.
We're talking about these informal markets, though, right? Not like official prison stores.
Right.
So how does trust even work in a place where, there's no real legal system to back up deals?
That's where things get really interesting. In these economies, your reputation, that becomes your currency.
Yeah.
It's like this social collateral. People rely a ton on word of mouth, past dealings. Got to figure out who you can actually trust.
So almost like a credit system, but it's based on your standing in the prison community.
Exactly. That system is crucial. Lets them trade without needing contracts or lawyers or any of that. Shows how adaptable social structures can be.
Fascinating. Okay, so we've got supply and demand, scarcity, trust. But what about inflation? Does that even exist in prison?
Oh, absolutely. Remember how the value of cigarettes could change based on, how much there was, how much people wanted them? Same thing happens when new currency pops up or when, say, contraband floods the market. You get this prison-specific inflation.
So walk me through that. Say someone smuggles in a ton of ramen. What happens?
Well, suddenly, there's a lot more ramen, right?
Right.
Supply goes up.
Yeah.
That can tank the value of the existing currencies,
Right.
causes a sort of price shock to the whole system. Got to readjust to all this new money.
It's like a mini economic crash, but with ramen noodles.
Exactly. Shows how even though these systems seem isolated, they're affected by the same stuff as larger economies.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these parallels to, like, real-world economics.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about the power dynamics in prison, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned before how gangs often control the flow of contraband.
Right. That's a huge part of understanding these economies. Games often operate like powerful entities. They set the terms, they set prices, and they profit from the demand for those scarce goods.
It's got to be risky, though, right?
Yeah.
Smuggling stuff into prison.
Oh, super risky. But that risk, it translates into bigger profits. The act of smuggling itself creates scarcity, which, like we said before, increases the value of whatever they're bringing in.
It's like a high-stakes game, but with way more serious consequences.
Exactly. And it's interesting to note, this actually mirrors some of the monopolistic behavior we see in the outside world, too.
How so?
Well, certain groups gain control over resources, right? Or over specific markets. They get to influence prices, how things are traded. Prison economies, they give us this micro view of those power structures.
This is making me rethink, like, everything I thought about economics. It's not just about money and markets. It's about all these social interactions, trust, resourcefulness.
Exactly. And we're just scratching the surface here. Prison economies can also show us things about human psychology, cooperation, even what drives people when those traditional incentives like money aren't really there.
Okay, now I'm really curious.
Eh,
What else can we learn about ourselves from all this?
Well, think about it. Even in prison, where so much freedom and so many resources are taken away, people still find a way to create, to trade, to build something. It says something about us, about our need to connect, to solve problems, to make things feel normal.
It really shows the resilience of people, huh?
Absolutely. These economies are like a testament to that. They force us to think differently, find new solutions, and rely on each other.
Really challenges our ideas of what's possible. Who would have thought we'd be learning about economics and human behavior from, like, a pack of cigarettes in prison?
It's a great reminder that even in the most unexpected places, there are lessons to be learned. But it's not just about looking inward. These prison economies can also show us trends happening in the wider world.
Okay, what kind of connections are we talking about?
Well, think about the rise of underground economies, not just in prisons, but globally. These informal systems, they operate under the radar, outside those traditional financial institutions.
You mean like black markets, those kinds of things? How do prison economies relate to that?
They give us a peek into how these underground economies work, how they figure out value, how trust and reputation play a part in making those deals happen.
So by studying these smaller economies in prison, we get a better understanding of the bigger hidden ones.
Exactly. It's like having a real-world lab to see how supply and demand work, how goods are traded, even how power structures form.
Incredible. These systems that seem so isolated can actually teach us about these huge, widespread things.
It really is.
But what about the future? We're moving toward this, like, super digital world. What can these economies tell us about how currency and value will change?
Now that is a great question, and it's something we'll dive into in the final part of our exploration. Get ready for some seriously thought-provoking stuff.
We've been on this incredible journey exploring these prison economies, seeing how stuff like cigarettes and ramen, they become like actual currency.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
But now I'm thinking, what happens as we move more and more toward this digital world? What about these systems in prison?
It's a question a lot of people are asking. You see the rise of cryptocurrency, digital wallets, all these new ways of exchanging value outside.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, could that tech get inside prisons? Could it change these informal economies?
It's almost like, I don't know, inmates trading Bitcoin or something.
Sounds a bit sci-fi, doesn't it?
Yeah. Is that even possible?
Maybe, maybe not. But remember, these prison economies, they've adapted to so much already. necessity, right? It
Hmm.
drives invention. And those systems, they're all about finding workarounds in tough spots.
So if, say, there was more tech access in prisons, could we see some whole new kind of currency pop up based on, like, digital stuff?
It's definitely possible.
Wow.
We might see currencies based on information, access to online things, even like your reputation in online communities. The whole idea of what's valuable, it could totally shift.
That's mind-blowing. But it also makes me think about the downsides. Could this, like, digital divide make things even worse, even more unequal inside?
That's a really important point. Just like outside, having access to tech, knowing how to use it, that could become a new kind of power in prison.
Yeah.
Those who can connect, who understand those digital systems, they'd have a big advantage.
It shows how even as these systems change, get more complex,
Hmm.
we got to think about, the ethics, making sure things are fair, even in these unconventional places.
Absolutely. We have to understand these systems not just from the economic side, but from a social ethical perspective too. As we figure out the future of money, of value, we got to be aware of the potential downsides. Make sure these changes benefit everyone, even those in prison.
This whole deep dive into prison economies, it's been eye-opening. We've seen how they work, how they adapt, what they tell us about, like human nature in general.
It's a fascinating area of study.
It is.
I hope our exploration today gave you a new appreciation for these systems, how ingenious they are, how resilient, and just how complex they are.
I know I'll never look at ramen noodles the same way again. But before we go, I want to leave you with something to think about. Imagine a world, no more traditional money. What would you use as currency? What would be valuable in that new system? Share your thoughts with us on social media. Let's keep this conversation going.